Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Rosman with the Washington Stormwater Center, and welcome to day 4 of the Municon. Today's workshop session is entitled Plans on Plans, Incorporating Smap into Comprehensive Planning. And our presenters today are Michelle Perdue with Kitsap County Public Works, Phil Struck with Struck Environmental, and Elizabeth Lowell with HDR.
All right. Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Lisa. So good morning, everyone. I hope everybody has had a great virtual conference to start. We're really excited to be here. And today we're going to be presenting on Kitsap County and a stormwater comprehensive planning effort that they recently wrapped up and how they incorporated their SMAP into that effort. So we'll talk a little bit about Kitsap County, just give you the quick background, what the process was for them for developing their SMAP, and then how that is expanding out to kind of just general protection of receiving waters through stormwater management and then looking forward. So in this virtual environment, we can't see each other in person these days. So I always like to do a little bit of an extra introduction because I know the little video is teeny tiny on your screen. So there'll be 3 of us speaking today. Michelle Perdue is the stormwater manager for Kitsap County, and she'll be talking a little bit about how this process has worked for the county and where they're taking it. Phil Struck, who is with Struck Environmental, and he really has led the SMAP effort for Kitsap County, and he'll be talking a little bit about that process. And then I'm Elizabeth Lowell. I'm with HDR, and I will share a little bit about the county. I'll kind of get us kicked off. And then I'll talk a little bit about, kind of broadly speaking, how did the comprehensive plan effort and the SMAP effort really get into kind of broader regional goals and reach for that. So with that, I will get us started. So Kitsap County, I won't read everything that's on the slide, but I do want to highlight just a few things here. You know, Kitsap County is in Western Washington, and it's really kind of at the heart of many uses of our water bodies here in Western Washington and Washington State, because it kind of sits squarely between the Seattle metropolitan area and then the peninsula, the Olympic Peninsula here in Washington. And then the other note is that Kitsap serves unincorporated areas of the county, but there's a lot of regional collaboration with other municipalities in the area, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. But lots of rain, and so we really need to take care of the stormwater in the region because of how much rain there is. And then the last kind of bit of introduction here is the Stormwater Comprehensive Plan. So we are going to talk about SMAP, but it was something that was incorporated into a broader comprehensive planning effort. So in December of 2020, Kitsap wrapped up their Stormwater Comprehensive Plan. And the goal of that plan, it was really designed to tie together a number of planning efforts and other kind of elements and components of Kitsap Stormwater Management Program. So that included, you know, existing retrofit studies that the county had done, the CIP projects that had been identified through those studies, and then also, you know, renewal needs, things that were needed there. But it also included some new, you know, assessments and analyses that were conducted as part of the planning effort. And that really included things like looking at potential climate change impacts and how those might be mitigated. So, you know, from that standpoint, all the way to assessing resource needs and how the county operates its stormwater management program, and then what might be needed in order to support compliance with new permit requirements. And then, of course, highlighted there, the plan included the completion of the new Stormwater Management Action Plan, or SMAP. And so there were a lot of components that got pulled together into this one comprehensive plan document. So that's a little background, and with that, I will turn it over to Phil to talk about the SMAP process more specifically.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I'm Phil Struck, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the approach that the county used to the SMAP and why they decided to start it relatively early in the permit term and some of the benefits they hope to realize through doing that. So the SMAP process that Kitsap County used really mirrors what's in the planning guidance, kind of a four-step process: inventory, assessment, prioritization, and then identifying a high priority basin to target stormwater investments, and that's the action plan. So next slide, please. So the inventory looked at the entire county, and the county delineated a total of 27 basins, typically between 5 and 15 square miles in size. 22 basins were advanced to the SMAP. 25 were eliminated because they're primarily rural forest with little stormwater infrastructure, little stormwater influence, so weren't really appropriate. You can see that some of the basins around the more urban areas of Bremerton and Silverdale are a little bit smaller, kind of reflects a little more complex environment, more complicated land use and stormwater infrastructure. Next slide, please. So the receiving water assessment really looked at what are the uses and what is needed to support them. Combination really of built environment components and natural environment components. The initial screening used some of their common regional tools like the watershed assessment tool from ecology, Salmonscape, Department of Health, shellfish harvest classifications. And then that was supplemented with local information from the county's ambient water quality monitoring program and BIBI monitoring effort, which was a pretty robust data set going back 10 to 15 years in some cases, which was super helpful for doing the analysis. A fairly intuitive process. I think most folks see that you're looking at what's there under both existing and future conditions. What are the relative value of those resources and what are the potential stressors and impacts that are affecting them. The output was really a combination of tabular data and GIS exhibits. And the GIS exhibit here we selected to illustrate some of the complexity of integrating watershed assessment, which does not follow jurisdictional boundaries with political boundaries. This exhibit is from Blackjack Creek Basin, which includes portions of the city of Port Orchard and city of Bremerton, which are shaded, and then the unshaded are the county. So we had to integrate the realities of those jurisdictional limits with the watershed assessment. Next slide, please. So assessing stormwater contribution really, in our case, we use some fairly traditional metrics. We're looking at urban growth areas, types of zoning, screening for the more high, potentially quote, high impact zones of commercial, industrial, high density residential, looking at total impervious area and various thresholds associated with impacts from the literature. And looking at areas that are treated. Now, we didn't do any numeric modeling of water quality, but we did incorporate where existing treatment is in place, such as regional facilities that the county has built. And the two photos on the bottom, the first one on the left is the Manchester regional treatment system, and the one on the right is the called Whispering Firs regional treatment system in Silverdale. So we incorporated that information where it was available. Obviously, this analysis kind of selects for more intensively developed urban areas or LAMRIDs, which are those local areas of more intensive rural development, which is kind of a mouthful. Next slide, please. So the basin prioritization had 13 primary criteria. There were a number of sub-criteria, generally balanced between beneficial use conditions and development pressures. We've shortlisted 4 top basins for more detailed analysis. They all kind of shared some common features of moderate impact, a lot of development pressure, quite a few multiple beneficial uses. And you can see that after summing all the ranking criteria, there was pretty tight scoring. There was pretty small margins separating the basins. So ultimately, what differentiated the top basin was the stormwater influence. This is Stormwater Action Plan. So we looked at what is the potential for some targeted stormwater investments to really make a difference in the short term. And that's what drove the final ranking. Next slide, please. So the basin that was identified is the East Dyes Inlet. And you see up in the corner there, this is on as areas of both the city of Bremerton and Kitsap County. It's you can see that there are a number of streams there, has a lot of beneficial uses. There's a lot of development pressure. We took a look at a sub-basin analysis to really kind of tease out where those resources were located and the specific pressures. All the dots on the map here illustrate the existing facilities. So we evaluated where those existing facilities were, potential for retrofit, and kind of identify areas that would really benefit from additional treatment. The outcome of the analysis was kind of a preliminary CIP that rolled up to a large extent projects that the county had already identified through a prior retrofit study, as well as barrier inventories and work that had previously been conducted. So the implementation plan for the SMAP is being integrated with the overall CIP. And it's likely to evolve over the next few years. And that was one of the reasons to start the SMAP now, is to give the county some time to gather additional data and go through the adaptive management process, gather additional data, reach out to stakeholders and other agencies and tribes, and really have an opportunity to refine the SMAP before it's finalized in 2023. Next slide, please. So why prepare it early? It's not due for 2 years. You know, I think the county sees the SMAP really as a working document at this point. Potential for revision and refinement over the next couple of years. It'll help provide some helpful context for land use planning, for integration with other resource management initiatives like watershed restoration, salmon recovery. There's a TMDL plan that's in place for the target basin that will be considered. And so getting an early jump on the SMAP really kind of supports the adaptive management approach and provides time for the county to coordinate and fine tune the SMAP to make sure that it provides optimal benefit to the community. That concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Phil. I had to get myself unmuted there. Thanks a lot, Phil. So yeah, so Phil walked us through kind of the SMAP process specifically, and a little bit of the why the county you know, started it so early, and how it's getting integrated into other just kind of the business side of what the Stormwater Division does. So I'm going to take us through kind of a broader look now of how both the SMAP process and then the broader stormwater comprehensive plan are really working towards, you know, the ultimate goal of really protecting and improving the health of receiving waters. So, you know, as many of us who are familiar with this permit know, you know, this stormwater planning element really brings together a number of concepts and recognizes that a watershed approach to stormwater management is really needed to maintain and improve water quality. You know, Phil mentioned one in the example there of the SMAP analysis. It just in that one basin, Blackjack Creek, you know, there's the jurisdictional boundaries and then there's the watershed boundaries, and there's a lot of overlap there. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the elements that are related to this, you know, stormwater planning requirement in the permit, and how Kitsap is really working toward the intent of more coordination between the different departments and agencies, the land use planning elements, and really the development of strategies to support receiving water health. So chief among, I would say, the coordination effort, if we want to call it that, is the county has a water as a resource policy, and it lays out guiding principles, not just for the stormwater division, but for the county as a whole, for how to preserve water as a resource rather than, you know, treating it as a waste stream. And there's just a couple specific components that I want to highlight that really support the overall goal of those coordinated solutions for, you know, benefiting receiving water. So one is, there's this guideline around the preservation of natural hydrology and maintaining forests and open spaces. So that, you know, that extends obviously to, you know, the planning and community development. It extends to, you know, transportation and roads, and obviously the stormwater division. Another component of the county's kind of approach to stormwater planning is their inclusion of the Lowell impact development code requirements. And, you know, obviously that is a permit requirement, but it's been in the place in the county for several years. And the county also provides a lot of guidance around how to use low impact development practices to really achieve some of the water quality objectives. And now, you know, it's interesting because a lot of that is actually run out of the community development department at the county. And so it's just a really good example of sort of this departmental coordination that needs to happen across different groups in order to really achieve desired water quality results. Phil also mentioned kind of how implementation of SMAP is being managed through things like the CIP process that the county already has. And a direct result of the coordination of kind of the SMAP process with Kitsap's comprehensive plan is that they updated their CIP prioritization criteria. So that was kind of a direct task out of the planning effort. And I want to point out kind of two updates. They're highlighted there on the slide specifically. So one ties back to that water as a resource policy goal. And the previous criteria, CIP prioritization criteria, certainly included components of that. And then the update really consolidated that as a single criteria to recognize that, you know, certain projects might have broader watershed implications than just kind of stormwater management. And so there was a real concerted effort to say we want to identify that as a criteria that we're looking for when we evaluate these projects. There's also criteria that recognize that, you know, there are projects that might support other facets of county operations. So like things like the county comprehensive plan. And I think one of the things that the stormwater planning requirement really recognizes is that stormwater management and comprehensive planning are managed by different regulations, different departments. And so this is just an example of how there can be some linkage and coordination between these different departments. And the last couple items here, another element of the stormwater planning is really to convene an interdisciplinary team to kind of help inform the program. And Kitsap actually already has kind of 2 teams in place that have been deputized, I would say, to serve in this function. And what we did with the comprehensive plan is we said, hey, you know, you guys are interdisciplinary teams. Why don't you review this comprehensive plan and tell us what you think and provide some comments? Because we know that the comprehensive plan is going to inform the work that you do, like education and outreach, or coordination for, you know, preparation for climate change impacts. So that was kind of an initial use of the interdisciplinary team approach. And then finally, you know, Kitsap is really looking for ways to foster more regional collaboration to support water quality. And one of these was to do an assessment of overburdened communities, who they are and how they might be better reached. And to do this, there was a collaboration with 7 other jurisdictions. So the same assessment was performed. And, you know, that was because, you know, one, all the jurisdictions needed to do that. All these agencies needed to do this assessment. But also because there might be an opportunity to make progress in reaching these communities through collaboration. So where there's commonalities, a regional approach really could be developed. So just to kind of sum up, there's a number of ways to foster a more watershed-based approach for stormwater agencies, including like county or city level policies that support more coordination, you know, creating linkages between department level decision making, like through the CIP prioritization process, you know, the use of multidisciplinary teams, and then identifying strategies that really work across agencies to benefit the region and the watershed. So with that, I will let Michelle close it out on where things are going next.
Sounds great. Thanks, Elizabeth. And thanks, Phil, for the really good description of our hard work on this project. We've heard a little bit about kind of the broad brush strokes of how we're going to use this product. I'll talk a little bit about our next steps. And now that we have our SMAP finished, we're just really beginning to tap the potential of this powerful tool. We're pretty happy with this final product, and we see a lot of ways that Kitsap can apply it. So our next steps will be to put this plan into action in some concrete ways, including things like reviewing those existing retrofit plans that we talked about a little bit earlier, to beneath the lens of this tool to identify some of the low-hanging fruit. We'll be using that updated CIP project rating form to rate and prioritize the projects that really have the best potential for positive impact, particularly in these target watersheds. And then another benefit is that this will help provide input into strategic planning overall for our stormwater division, including applying some SMART goals for some measurable impacts. And what that's going to look like will be to create an implementation plan to better coordinate some of that partner work, like we just heard about with our interdepartmental team, and to build on that more coordinated approach. We'll be creating some structured and comprehensive work plans for our internal teams, like our operations and maintenance, inspections, and retrofit. Prior to this project, we spent a lot of time being more reactive than proactive. So this will help us to create some dynamic work plans for those teams that prioritize projects in a more intentional way, while still really allowing those emergent needs to be addressed. And then finally, you know, it's about applying that adaptive management, developing and applying some more robust tracking mechanisms, which will help us illustrate the impact of our work, identify some more of the opportunities for improvement and future growth, and also helping us to quantify costs, achievements, and additional program needs. And with that, I believe that concludes our presentation. Phil, Elizabeth, do you have anything more to add?
In here.
I think that was a great way to take it home.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Excuse me, allergies. We have a couple minutes for questions. We've got 2 questions in the chat. So I believe the first one is for Phil. It came in during his presentation, and it says, excuse me, I'm having a little trouble with my computer. On the Basin Prioritization step, can you say more about how you came up with the numbers on that table and how those numbers were linked to your assessment of conditions?
Well, somewhere, generally the analysis used a score that was scaled to the criteria. It's kind of hard to generalize since there was some variability in how it was done. You know, for on a simple level, like say for impervious, we broke it down according to level of impervious. You know, I think the literature suggests that you start to get 5 to 10% impervious and you start to see, you know, more and more significant impacts. So we kind of scaled it relative to percent of impervious. Some of the UGA and city boundary stuff is really a equation based on percent of the basin that was within the county jurisdiction, as well as the type of zoning that was in place. So the data documentation was important. All the assessment tables were notated pretty significantly to show how the scoring was done and what the criteria was for each relative scoring level. So I hope I'm being somewhat responsive to your question. There was some, I think that the end of the process, the important piece was to make sure that it was documented how the scoring was done and that everybody agreed that it was an appropriate scale to use for scoring, and there was some equivalency across the board, so there wasn't 1 or 2 criteria that were driving the end result.
Okay, great. And I'm going to squeeze this question in. As a phase 2 county, was the focus of the evaluation planning limited to the geographic scope of the permit? I'm not sure who wants to take that one.
I can take a stab at it. No, I think that it was expanded a little bit. Initially, I think the permit, the census urbanized areas would have said that the county didn't have to do maybe 22 basins. It may have been closer to somewhere between 15 and 20. But I think the decision was that there were issues in those basins, there were considerations, and the county didn't want to exclude areas from the planning process without real clear justification for doing so. So the five basins that were excluded were really clearly highly rural, virtually, you know, very low population, and mostly commercial forests. So it wasn't limited to just what's required within the permit. It was expanded a little bit.
All right, great. And with that, we're going to have to wrap it up, but thank you all for your great presentation and this wonderful project. Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.